Hi everyone, I'm Amina,
And I'm Eli.
and we're editors at the Daily Targum. Welcome to Targum Tea, a podcast that focuses on pop culture reviews and social media. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the sci-fi thriller The Platform. This episode will include spoilers, so beware. Okay, so Eli, do you want to just start by talking a little bit about the plot and stuff?
Yeah, so the platform opens up on basically this prison type of area. And it's kind of an interesting type of prison. It's called the platform because there's two people per level on this platform. And there is a floor that's filled with food. And that platform kind of goes down throughout the day. And I think they said there's like 333 levels or whatever to this platform. And basically, people who are in this prison cell of sorts um, have like maybe a minute or two to grab whatever food that they can. And then the platform goes back down. And that's kind of the food that they have for the day. And so we open up on our main character who's named Greng or Grong,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't have any clue where he is. And kind of like the audience, we're kind of thrown into this world and we have no idea where we are at all. And we find out through his cellmate that they are in a place that is sort of like a prison. And every 30 days or so, they get moved to a different level in the platform. And if they're on the lower levels of the platform, they're obviously not going to get as much food as the people on the higher levels of the platform. And so this movie kind of becomes a game of survival for Garang and for the other prisoners about how they're going to survive throughout the film.
Yeah, and I think it's really should not be overlooked that the only subsistence they have is the platform. Like there is
Hmm.
no other food available options besides resulting in cannibalism and stuff.
Hmm.
So that can't be overstressed
Yeah, they
about
can't go anywhere. They literally have to stay in this like one, like, I guess you could call it like a room, but it's not really a room. It's just kind of a level. And they have to stay in there for 30 days and then they get moved to whatever level they're at for the next one.
Also, I think a really important part of the plot is that they don't know how many levels there are to the vicinity they're in. All they know is that at first they just know that there's at least 200 floors or there's at least 150 floors. But then as the movie gets longer and we get more into the plot, we realize that there are at least 330 floors and stuff.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that is a really crazy element to the movie.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm a big fan of dystopian movies. I love when filmmakers and storytellers take a look at a different type of world and they kind of use it to compare it to the world we live in right now. And that's sort of what the filmmakers are trying to do in this movie. There's a lot of themes going on, stuff about classism. They bring up, socialism and communism. There's kind of this theme of like what you amount to as a human being when you're in a cell and you're kind of forced to maybe do things that are less than good, I think you could say, and we can start getting into spoilers about what happened. But I think it's interesting just to start with because it's a dystopian movie, like how they build the dystopian world, and yeah.
Yeah, so do you want to talk a little bit about some of the themes you were discussing?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess to start out, the one that definitely like I feel like was most prevalent throughout the movie was this idea of class. And it's very similar to I mean, have you seen Snowpiercer before?
No, I haven't.
So it's very similar to this movie called Snowpiercer by Bong Joon-ho, who also directed Parasite, which was the
Mm.
Oscar Best Picture winner from last year. And Snowpiercer basically revolves around everyone is on this train that revolves around the Earth, and the Earth has become basically uninhabitable. And so basically every day everyone's on this train and they're revolving around the Earth, and the train is separated by the haves and the have-nots. And that's sort of what's going on in this movie as well. There's this kind of theme about the people who are at the top who don't leave any food for the people at the bottom, and about how the characters kind of react to that circumstance, which I thought was pretty interesting.
I totally agree, and I also think like another theme that really ties closely with this idea is there were ideas about racism for sure in the
Yeah,
movie.
100%. Hmm.
For example, the new sort of last cellmate that our main character has is named Bahara, right?
Bahara, yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's right.
and he is a black man and he wants to they're on the fifth level, right? And he wants to climb to the top. He is so close. And listen to the metaphor here. He is so close to the top and it's like this white couple that is like sort of the level before, level 4. And he like throws a rope. He has the means to carry himself over. He just needs that like little push
Hmm.
and the white couple literally like shits on his face.
Yeah.
Literally like shits on his face. And it was this movie was just like a metaphor the whole way through, you know.
100%.
So what other themes were there that we need to talk
Well,
about?
yeah, I think it's interesting too because I didn't even pick up on the racism theme the first time I like just watched it. But now that you brought that up, I mean, there's definitely this sense of like, why are the people who are at the top? And the film kind of makes this case that they're kind of there randomly in a way. Like there is no rhyme or reason why there's people at the top levels. It's just that they're there. And throughout the movie, we see like different characters will wind up in different areas. So Garang, I think the first level that they're on is level 33
Mhm.
or 48 or one of those. It's not too bad. And his cellmate basically says to him,
Wait, I think we should talk about like why it's not too bad, right? Like it's not
"Yeah,
too because they're in the middle,
they're
right?
in the
So,
middle
like
cell, so they still have food
they
when they come down."
they still have food when they come down and they still have enough where they're comfortable to leave some left. Okay?
Right,
I just want to
exactly.
stress like this middle area. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, so and he basically his roommate tells him that, or his cellmate tells him that this is a good area to be at because we still have food when we're coming down. Now, we as the audience are kind of interested at this point in the movie of what happens when he's on a really low level. And I think about 20 or 25 minutes in, we get to see what happens. Grain gets put on, I think it's level 170. And it's at this level that once the platform comes to, I guess, probably level maybe like 100 and below, there's no food left. And there's no food left because the people at the top basically took all of it and gave nothing to the people at the bottom. Yeah, so there's these like different things, different disgusting moments that happen that Gurung has to resort to, cannibalism, um, uh, really, really gross. I guess I can say like nightmares that he starts having. And I think a good thing to touch on is the level of really disgusting violence that is in this movie.
For
It's
sure. Even
it's
before we start
really bad.
talking about like how gross those parts were, something you touched on that's really important is like how we don't know who's at the top and like
Hmm.
how they got there. But I think that really demonstrates like the precarity of the situation and like the systems we live in because just how quickly you can wind up at the bottom of like which is the bottom is like a metaphor for like like job losing your job or like losing your income or losing like having food insecurity and stuff and like the next second like you can be at the top and I think that what the movie is trying to say is like the systems are what's really working against us and we're all the same and it's like these levels really don't they mean nothing and
Hmm.
yeah I think um I mean, we could talk about the end of the movie in like a little bit, but I think that's what really gets to where the ending goes.
Oh, I completely
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, and just to talk about like all the gory violence, I think you're right when we're talking about how quick like how adamant our main character was to not result in like this disgusting violence at first and then eventually like he sort of succumbs to it and
Hmm.
it's really gross to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. They set Gurung up as like this character who's kind of like timid, I guess is the best way to say it. And that's something you'll see a lot in dystopian movies, that they'll kind of start with a character who's more on the innocent side, I guess is the best way to put it. But as the movie goes on, he kind of has to become a different person if he wants to survive. And yeah, I mean, to comment on what you were just saying, there, like, the level of like violence is like it's like almost absurd. And I think that it's taken to almost a cartoonish level on purpose, though. I think the filmmakers did that because they know that the tone that they're going for is like kind of like it's serious, but there is kind of a hint of comedy to it just because it's so over the top. And I think they did that because they know like this topic, like these ideas that they're getting are like a little like over the top and like cartoonish, and they do that for a reason. And I think it's interesting how they do it. I had seen a
I
movie.
disagree, to be honest. Like, I respect what you're saying, but I think that, like, they're saying that this is like cannibalism, that's like the extreme, but I think
Yeah.
what we do to each other now is like so much worse. I think
Hmm.
how I mean, like, the people who are more at the top, how we literally take away from people, um like, towards the bottom of our systems. And like, when we do get to the bottom, of course we're going to do whatever it takes to like survive, and we don't
Hmm.
even think about looking up or like looking to ask for um like looking to change things upwards, because just as our main character Gorong said, is like, you can't shit upwards, like, you
Hmm.
can't.
Exactly.
So it's like the people who are on our levels that get the brunt of it, when it's not the people who are on our levels that like screw us.
Hmm.
So I think that it's actually saying like, these like, we're so busy like attacking each other, that.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I don't think it. I mean, I don't really study film, so I didn't think it was like um gross. Like, it's like comically gross. I thought it was like just really trying to get a point across.
Yeah, maybe not like comically gross, but just like it's interesting that you say that because there's like movies that like, so Snowpiercer, for example, which I'm using that as an example because this movie really reminded me of Snowpiercer, especially with the themes. They go for this like very over the top violence, and I think the reason that they do it is not so much for like shock value, but it is kind of what you're getting at, where like the people on the bottom of this platform, that's what they have to do to survive. And the movie makes a point that the people on the top, the reason that that happens is because the people on the top don't care about the people on the bottom. And they choose not to leave portions aside for those people on the bottom. A, because of, you could say, the system that's been created. And we can kind of get into that. They talk about the administration, and the administration is kind of like this dystopian government, which they don't go too much into, but that's kind of hinted at as like the like running government or whatever.
Mhm.
And they make a point about how almost like there's a character who, if there who believes that if there was kind of like a socialistic value to what they're doing, meaning if they kind of spread the wealth to everyone, then this wouldn't be necessary. But I don't know. I had like I got like hints of like socialism versus like capitalism in this. What do you think?
I think that we should, before we even start getting into that, we need to talk about one of the most important characters, who was like the woman, the former administrator woman. I have no idea what her name is. She
I
might have
completely
be
forgot.
unnamed. But she was just like, okay, so for me, I want to talk about her character a little bit. So basically, she was like, it used to be in the administration, but she said she didn't really know like what they were up to, what the prison system like. And first of all, I would like to make this point that we don't know if this is a prison. Okay? Like, we keep calling
Mhm.
it a prison, but it was never really explicitly called that. Also, our main character didn't do anything to wind up in prison. He
Yeah.
actually thought he was going to get a degree out of this, which makes me think like, this makes me think so much, first of all, because, but we can get into it. Okay, let's just keep that in the back of our heads. Okay. So the administrator, she realizes that she has cancer, and then she decides to go and help out. And the way she thinks that is going to like help out this, like, I want to like this environment is by joining it and everything like that. So basically she voluntarily goes into this prison system knowing what it's like, but she still has privileges because first of all she can bring her dog, and second of all she gets to pick who her roommate is, her cellmate.
Hmm.
So I think that's like a really important metaphor because even though like the people who want to help change these things, they still come from places of privilege,
Yeah.
and like that was undeniable. And then when she um I really want to talk about when she kills herself because when she kills herself, I was really shook. But for
Big time.
me, I didn't think it was because she wound up on a like a low level. I
Hmm.
think she ended up killing herself because she thought that it was only 200 levels or 150 levels of like this hell, but then she looked down and she realized like I think they
There's
were on
more.
like level 230 or something. She realized like there was more people being affected than she could have ever thought, and I
Hmm.
think that's why she killed herself because she was like she was just she couldn't I don't think she could have take like she just couldn't even fathom like how much suffering was going on, you know?
Yeah, and she makes the point too that I think that she knew that she had cancer,
Mhm.
breast cancer, before coming into, they call it the hole, I think is what they say.
Yeah.
And it's because of that that she says like, I have nothing more to lose, essentially. And she kind of pleads, I don't want to say she pleads ignorance, but she basically says that she didn't know that there was this many levels.
Mm.
And on some level, I definitely like sympathized with her because clearly she was trying to promote this idea of like, if you put aside plates at the top for people on the bottom, then the administration, quote unquote, loses because the whole thing falls apart if everyone basically gets a share of the food. At the same time, though, she does come across as a little bit like, I'm privileged, and I I kind of plead ignorance to the fact that I didn't know that there was 250 level or more than 250 levels to this thing, which I don't know if the film wants us to believe her or not, but certainly there's this idea that she couldn't handle that, and so she ends up killing herself, and that has a really really big impact on Garang,
Mhm.
because we see that we've now seen him with like a super cynical character in the beginning of the movie, and then this was a character who was a bit more optimistic, and both of them end up dying in it, and they both have huge impacts on his character.
For sure. And even I think that everything is really deliberate with her character. I think that we don't it doesn't matter if we believe her or not, like if we
Mhm.
believe that she was truly ignorant about this. I think that like this is just really a metaphor for people who are not technically like the elite. And when I'm talking about the elite, I mean it could be a metaphor for the wealthy 1%, or it could be a metaphor for even like Rutgers, you know? So I'm I mean, we can talk about it,
It's
but
interesting.
so if we think, all right, so if we think this is like a metaphor for Rutgers, then the elite, like the most like powerful, would be I would say like the board of governors.
Mm,
That's like floor zero, and then I would say like she would probably be the person that would like an administrator, like a random administrator. So like how much of an influence do random administrators have on our education? Yeah, probably like somewhat of a good influence, but like they're not the ones like completely pulling the strings.
right.
So I think it's just, I think that this movie as a whole is just a reflection of what our systems in society look like. Because
Hmm.
as I'm saying this, like, you can totally apply this to Rutgers because I think it can be applied. It was meant to be applied to colleges too because he literally walked in thinking he was going to get a degree. He was willing to play their games, but it's literally like impossible, in these unless you're on the top floors. I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, they don't even like, and that's what's cool about this is that you can kind of apply this to many things because they don't go too into depth about the background of the administration. They don't really talk about like why the cell was made. Like we don't get any backstory about like why this was necessary at all. They don't say that there's like extreme hunger going on or extreme poverty. I think those are things that we assume because why else would you put yourself like through this suffering? But
Mm,
at the same time, I almost want to say like this might sound weird, but that it kind of reminds me of the situation that we're all in right now, in that we're all kind of like isolated. We're not like isolated to the point where we're in like prison cells or whatnot, but
But wait, Eli, I think it applied to us even before we got into Corona.
no,
And
no, even before too.
but you're saying like you're saying why would they willingly decide to go into the hole? Well, why
Yeah,
would we willingly decide to go into college when we know that it's going to put us into debt? Like we could
yeah,
end
that's
up
true.
on the we only enter college because we think we're going to be like on the higher floors
Right,
eventually.
exactly.
But like there's that very good chance that we fall to the bottom. So I'm saying like I think this movie is like reflecting a lot of what our societies are looking like, and we know that coronavirus is taking our societies and like just exposing all the tea.
Yeah,
I think that's
100%.
why it can totally be applied.
100%. They also say that I don't know if they specifically mention this, but that once they get that accredited diploma or whatever they're speaking of, that they have a higher social status in, I guess whatever world or country that they're in. That's interesting. It reminded me of if you've seen Black Mirror. There's a Black Mirror episode where they talk about social status, and that's something that's super super prevalent. And a lot of these movies that talk about class, they talk about how like you put yourself through debt, and you were just talking about Rutgers. You put yourself through the debt of going to college because you come out with a degree, and that degree is supposed to lead to a better life, and blah blah blah. But in the end, it's kind of like you're just putting yourself through misery, almost, so to speak.
You're literally
Um,
we willingly decided to enter the hole when we decided
yeah,
to go to Rutgers. I
yeah,
think we're in the hole all the time.
yeah.
But another theme before we touch on more of like the ending stuff, one of the themes I really wanted to get to was surveillance, because
Mm,
I think surveillance is such an important issue for today's time that really doesn't get talked about. When we talk about like surveillance capitalism, like we're talking about how we're constantly getting advertised at all the time through our cell phone devices and through like apps and social media. But that's another topic. I want to talk about how they know when you ate something and like stole it, and they
mm-hmm.
knew that because they would either like make it really hot or make it really cold.
Yeah.
And I think that like that fear of like being watched, or like knowing that they're being watched, is definitely there, and
Mm-hmm.
that totally reflects our systems now, because surveillance is obviously everywhere. Like when you punch into a job, like, and you're like putting in a time clock, or like video cameras at work or video cameras at school, like you're being watched, and that really affects like social behavior. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like one of the themes in the film, in the movie too.
About surveillance, yeah, no, totally. I was like a tiny bit confused about like why they do that, and I guess that maybe it goes to the whole question of why they even have the platform in general, because I guess they kind of talk about how the reason they have it is, I guess, to just prove that if you have like 330, or I think it would be more than that because it's two per cell, like
Mhm.
666 people, which, by the way, probably has significance in this movie. If you
Oh
have
wow, I did not even. You're so right. I was
that,
wondering.
I had picked up, I was like 333 levels, and then I was like, oh, so times two, so it's 666.
Right.
Okay, that's got to mean something. There's a lot of religious like imagery, I feel like, in this movie as well.
You're
Um,
so right.
but yeah, I was like a little bit confused, like why do they have the administration like in the first place? Like, is it to prove that like people are like bad and they're not going to give like that they're not going to give people food to people on the bottom? There's a sort of theme of like whose fault is this? Like, who do we blame for everything that's going on? Do we blame the administration, aka the government? Do we blame people because people are going to do what is best for them? Essentially, they're going to be selfish, or is there no one to blame, and that this is just kind of the way life is? I wasn't sure like who we're supposed to kind of like blame about this.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because at the end, I mean, this will go towards the end of the movie, but at the end of the movie, he sort of like the main character going forgives his cellmate, because like whoever he sees, if it's imaginary or not, he's consistently
Mm-hmm.
seeing his old cellmate, Trimagasi. And
Yep.
okay, let's talk about him for a little bit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, when his backstory, Eli, I hope you picked up on that. Like, that whole thing about advertising and media, that was
Oh,
so
100%.
important. That was so crazy. Okay, so basically, it's the idea that he was like wanted this really sharp knife, and he was like, I don't even really need a knife, but like it looks awesome. And then the next day, he sees an ad for like an even better knife, and he
Mm,
wants that knife. And it's basically like this idea of like fear of missing out, you know. He really like he was too scared that he was missing something by not having this new knife, even though he had a perfectly fine knife. And that
yeah.
is precisely like how people talk about us and our relationship to like social media and advertising now. Because like, you know, I can't even like not be on Twitter for like a day because I'm too scared like I'll miss out on something important, you know. It's like this fear of missing out, and I
Yeah.
picked up on that in the film.
Yeah, and it's basically like the advertisers are saying like here's something that you pay for, and then like a couple months later like, oh, here's like another thing that's better than that thing, but you already bought that one, so you're going to want. And also there's significance that that's the weapon, so they get like one thing that they can bring into the hole with them.
Hmm.
And Garang brings in the book Don he I don't remember how to pronounce the last name, but obviously that has significance. His roommate brings in the knife that he was talking about in like that you were just talking about with like the advertisements, and I thought that was really interesting as well.
And I
uh,
don't think it was a coincidence that that's the knife that he died from, you know?
yeah, yeah, exactly, and that's ultimately used to kill him. And I think you can maybe even say like the way that advertisers like kind of take over our life, they're in a way like kind of killing us by making us want to get like this,
Period.
thing.
Period.
Yeah, taking away like our freedoms, which is interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of this movie is very dense. Like you can pull like a lot of different themes from this movie.
For sure. I'm sure if I watched it again, I would be like, whoa. Like, I feel like it's like watching a whole other movie.
Yeah, totally. And I think and we can kind of start going into the end of the movie. By the end of the movie, so in the final 20 minutes, he gets put on after surviving level like 170 or whatever, which we think he's going to end up dying. Um, he has to resort to cannibalism, obviously, and he ends up on level 6. And for this whole movie, we're kind of wondering like, what happens when you get to those top like 10 levels or whatever. So he gets to level 6, and we get through this other character, Bahara was his name, I'm pretty sure.
Mhm.
um, that there's this sense to people that they want things to change, and Bahara is one of those characters that wants things to change. And so they kind of have this like mini quest in the last 20 minutes of the movie to give everyone on every floor a share of food. And by doing that, they kind of want to prove to the establishment that this system is stupid, basically, that humans can be good and that we can give a fair share to everyone if you really try. And the last 20 minutes of this movie are just they're kind of like tough to watch, definitely, because it's like suspenseful, but it's also just are people going to respond the right way? And we see like people don't respond the right way. They have to resort to violence to convince them of sharing the food for people, which I thought was pretty sad. And I guess that's one of the things I guess I didn't like as much about the movie is that it's just so cynical, and I think it kind of stumbles a little bit in the end because it kind of leaves you with this super like cold feeling that like we're all screwed. I guess like I don't honestly know. Like I think it wanted to raise questions. I don't think it wanted to give answers, probably on purpose, because I don't know if there's like a right answer to how you fix like classism and the haves and have nots and all the themes that we've been getting at. But the ending just left me so cold and like distant, and I was like,
Really? I
what's
feel
going on?
hopeful.
You
I
feel
feel
hopeful at the
hopeful.
end?
Yeah.
My God,
Because,
how? There's like a kid that's
okay,
down at the
yeah,
bottom.
listen. Okay, so like all these horrible things happen. And then obviously the only person that could ever be equipped to solve something like this is a young person. Like it's not going to happen from these old people. Like we saw that Trimagasi was far too old and stuck in his ways to ever think about changing the system. It was younger Goreg who started thinking of these ideas, and even he was limited in his own approach because he didn't know the system inside out. He wasn't raised in it, and he was like, he he already fell to victim to like that horrible, disgusting, inhumane violence that the system sort of perpetuated. So like he was not the person to like lead the revolution. It has to be the young person. And like it's not just a message to the administration that the young person like that there is a young person there. I think it was like something more like the change can only come from a young person. That's what I got.
And I guess that's what the film was kind of going for, is like you're ultimately supposed to kind of blame, like, yes, you can blame the people, but you have to blame like the system that's been set up by, the government. I guess. Like, again, I'm kind
I,
of like guessing on there.
I'm like kind of with you too because I think at the end he forgives his roommate. That's what I
Yeah.
was trying to get at earlier that I totally forgot about
Hmm.
because at the end like when um also it's the daughter, she was a girl, the girl that goes up and like she is gone and then he's like seeing a vision of his roommate or whatever,
Hmm.
which I think he's dying, right?
Yeah, no,
That's
he's
what
dying.
he does.
He's 100%
He's
dying.
100% dying. So like he's like going to like wherever he's going while he's dying and he sees his roommate and he says like they like talk and converse. I don't think he
Yeah.
blames him at all. I think he said like he was like I will never forgive you like earlier in the
Mm.
movie, but I think he has forgiven him. I think he like realized like that's what I got too. I think
Yeah.
that like even now like boomers like we can talk about how boomers are so stuck in their ways and stuff, but like can we really blame them like when
Yeah.
they were like people are really raised to like think certain
Believe
ways.
those things. Yeah. They don't have a choice. Yeah. Do you think the ending was supposed to be like, I guess you're not supposed to know what happens, because you kind of get a sense that Garang takes himself off of the platform quite literally, because he's not like chosen to go up. He's not like the symbol that he's supposed to like represent. That this little kid that was stuck in this hole, that's supposed to be the symbol, not him. And so is that supposed to be taken like, I guess, like metaphorically? Do we think that he dies at the end? Do we think that maybe it's just like this hole of like nothingness, because it's just darkness at the end, like there's nothing there, and it
For
kind
me,
of.
I just took that as like a complete metaphor, like everything you just said, because like for me, I think of it like he literally kind of created this movement. He like
Mm,
sought out change and he like knew that people wouldn't change until he said like he's like change doesn't happen naturally, like change happens on purpose. And then when his like role in the movement is like done, he has
mhm.
like he dies.
Yeah,
Like it's not his place anymore. And just like as I said, like he's too old, like he's too used to the system. Like this has to come from someone who's not him.
yeah.
So I think
I
that's why he dies. And I think there's countless people in like every movement who like made such an influence that like unfortunately like history won't remember all of them. Very unfortunate, but like
Yeah.
that's just how things work. But yeah, so what do you think? What do you rate this movie?
Out of 5 teacups, so I'm gonna give it 3 teacups. I think it's a really, really interesting movie. I enjoyed watching it, despite like being totally and utterly disturbed and disgusted by it. I think it falls flat at times because it does get a little like boring in the middle and towards the end. But I think it raises some really interesting questions, and for that, I think it deserves 3 teacups, definitely.
Word, I would say 4. Like I really
Lord, nice.
yeah, because I really like things that like make you think and make you want to talk about it and like
Mhm.
this I just really want to keep talking about this and I made my friends like watch it too. And I think that's the point of like art. Like you shouldn't really like it's not all the time that you have to just like enjoy something just and you know what's going on. Like we have like I just created a whole movie for myself. Like I could be so wrong about everything
Mhm.
I said, but like I that's what I got. I don't know.
Yep, that's the great thing about film, is that you can kind of interpret it the way that speaks to you, which is awesome. I'll definitely say that if you are going to watch this movie, don't watch it with your parents, because it's definitely one of those, that can make for uncomfortable viewing, I'm sure.
Yeah, and also as Eli texted me like you might want to watch 3 episodes of The Office right afterwards
Yep.
to just get your mind off of it.
It is it's rated TV mature, I think, is like what it says, and it earns that rating. Like 100% earns that rating.
Yeah. But that's all for today. So join us next time on Targum Tea for more reviews and make sure to follow the Daily Targum on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more content. Bye.
Later.